Good evening, Earthlings. We are here to talk about the film Fire in the Sky, supposedly based on a true story. So we're going to figure out what was true, what wasn't, and why did this film terrify audiences who watched it in 1993. So let's jump right in. I was wondering, and you guys who are watching, shoot your questions out in the comments and we'll talk about them. But what was your reaction to the abduction scene the first time you saw this movie?
Sorry.
Drew just left.
That's what I wanted to do. That's what I did. I left when I saw
You left the theater screaming?
I wasn't in the theater. My cousin had rented it or copied it. I don't know how he had it. But my parents were in Las Vegas attending one of my cousin's weddings. So I stayed with my aunt and uncle. And I was sitting up in the back room and I think I got done playing Sega and I saw Fire in the Sky and I was like, oh, I've heard about this. I'll watch this. So I put it in and watched it and thought, okay, no big deal. And I'm sitting back there in the dark too, because it's later at night. And then the flashback scene hit and it terrified me. I think I was up all night long. Like I did not sleep when I went to bed that night. And it like stayed with me for a couple of days. Like I just kept going back to that and how terrifying it was. And I think it's mostly has to do with the acting of D.B. Sweeney. How he carried that scene with his screaming and how terrified he was. The one part that really stuck out to me was when he's floating around and he goes into that other cocoon and it's like inside of another body that has been there forever.
Yeah.
Like, oh no. And then being drugged down the hallway with all the like a tricycle and shoes and glasses and the experiments that they put on him. I mean, it was like, I watch horror films all the time and I had never been that freaked out as I was when I saw that. And
Yeah,
it took me about 10 years to watch that show again.
Well, can't you see all these other movies now, looking back at this one, they were inspired probably by this scene, because even we're going to do the fourth kind coming up soon. Their abduction scene, I thought, was very reminiscent of some of the stuff we saw in here. X-Files, I'm sure, took from this, and it was quite impactful.
Oh, yeah.
Doug, yeah, I would say even Nope, when they're kind of going through, when they get abducted in that and they're going through that, I don't know, ship's anus or whatever. It's very, kind of you're stuck, kind of like what he was and whatever that skin was. But as for me, I know I watched this movie when I was younger. Absolutely know I did. I'm pretty sure I saw this in the theater because I've always been into aliens, kind of. I mean, not deep, but just like amateur wise, just kind of keep an eye on things or what's going on. So I was intrigued, but I don't remember how I felt about it. I remember watching it, and I don't think I've watched it until just recently. I think I watched it in 93 when I was like 17 or 18, and haven't watched it until just a few weeks ago. So, but I can say even with a few weeks ago, it was done well in the 90s where it still holds up today, I think. Mm-hmm. Obviously the way they did cinematography in the early 90s compared to today, completely different. But if you can remember how movies were made back then and you watch it, it holds up, and it holds up very well. I mean, it wasn't weird. Even when I know we're just talking about the abduction, but in the flashback, the way he's floating around that ship, it's not like he's on ropes and, he's not swinging. He's just literally floating up, and they did that really, really well. So, but yeah, it's a little bit creepy.
Did the aliens scare you? Because at first I thought they kind of looked like Muppets, and they are actually puppets. I've got a picture of them here. It's not great quality, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
And I thought at first, well, that's kind of goofy. But then as the scene went on, it's like it's right in that line of it is actually horrifying.
Yeah, and it all depends on, the atmosphere, what's happening, where you're at. If we saw these aliens on the Muppet Show and they're just dancing along with the rest of the Muppets, you wouldn't think much of it. It's like, oh, look at the cute little aliens. But you can take Kermit the Frog and have him, be an alien and doing all the experiments they did on him. And if you hadn't seen Kermit the Frog before, you'd be like, oh, that's a weird looking frog animal. And might get creeped out from that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying 100%, but yeah, they were done pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, and the design isn't necessarily the stereotypical alien design. I mean, in a way it is. They still have the large heads and the thin bodies, but they didn't make the eyes like, usually it's the big black eyes.
Yeah.
And they made these like more human eyes.
Yeah.
Which I think that's the part that makes the aliens a little bit more, scary, because they look human. They don't look like, and they don't look like the stereotype. If they would have made them little green guys with the big alien eyes, it would have not had the same effect.
I took that as what the spacesuit was, because they see that suit floating, and that looked like your typical Greys alien,
Mm-hmm.
And so I did think it was kind of a cool creative choice that the Greys that we think of, that's not actually what they look like. That's just a suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much expression in eyes too. When you got the regular aliens with the black eyes and they stare at you, it's like, oh, I think he's looking at me. He might be looking at
him.
Yeah, exactly. But when they have those human eyes, they definitely, because with eyes you can show emotion, you can show fear, you can show anger, you can show empathy. So that just made the alien see. Yeah,
I mean, he's got facial expressions, so it's
he's not happy. Those eyes are not happy. So that added to the creep factor of it, definitely.
Yeah, you almost couldn't tell what the expression on their face was, and that was a little scary because you couldn't tell. I mean, I guess we kind of figure out that they're evil in this, but
Right.
at first, like, you can't tell if they're good or bad. And if you know some of the true story, you might think this is going to turn out to be an okay scene. Because in Travis Walton's true story that he claims, right? His perspective, he claims when he was abducted that the aliens helped him, right?
Yeah.
You guys want to explain what they said or what Walton said?
I'll go.
Awesome.
In reality, or the story that Walton tells is that the scene where he's abducted, what happened was the ship was hovering. He was going out to take a look at, and he was hiding and everything like that. And there was some kind of discharge from the ship. And that discharge is what threw him in the movie. Well, in reality, it injured him. And so he did say that the rest of his friends freaked out and drove away. But when they took him on the ship, they actually repaired him. They were healing him. And, he told stories about he saw 2 different humans on the ship that actually were a part of the ship. It wasn't like they were captured too. They were like the leaders or CIA or something. I don't know, whatever he's trying to say. Yeah, they were part of the crew. So, and they were the ones that helped translate because he couldn't understand the aliens. So the humans came in and it's like, oh, the aliens accidentally hurt you and they're fixing you. And then we're going to drop you in a town 3 towns away for some reason.
They weren't good with directions.
Yeah. They got all the way to Earth and they're like, what? Where are we? No Google Math back then. So, but yeah, the way he explains it is the aliens were very kind. They were helpful, and they were almost apologetic. It's like, we didn't want you to see us. We didn't want you to be there, and our ship did its thing, and our bad. Here's a nice fix up, no charge, tip the waitress on the way out, whatever. So yeah, it's interesting to compare the two stories because I do like I mean, yes, for movie's sake, you want the experience of good versus evil, aliens versus humans. But in reality, I would really like to see the aliens come down and be like, okay, let's all calm down. We're not here to destroy you. We just figure we drop off a couple things that might help out and explain why you are all horrible at being living beings. Maybe,
Yeah.
or something.
Well,
like
if we ever actually had a first contact with an alien race, they land, the very first one that steps off that ship is getting shot. The very first one is getting shot.
Somebody's out there.
There's somebody waiting for that. And so maybe if there are actually aliens out there, and maybe that's why they're abducting us one at a time. It's just like, hey, we can take one, talk it over a little bit with them, send them back. They can spread the news. Because if they just showed up and landed and came out like, hey, everybody, that's it. That would happen.
Your theory is that abducting humans is their publicity campaign.
It could be.
Oh, it's not so bad.
Maybe that's why that's how they're establishing relations. First of all, they're testing us out to find out, like, all right, do you think we can go down and talk to them? So take one, find out what that one's like, take another one, and then they kind of get all this data, and then they're like, okay, we know where we need to land and who we need to talk to. Like, don't land there. If you land there, they're going to shoot you. If you land over here, they might talk to you. That's a theory.
Yeah. There's a great book out there called Armada, written by Ernest Cline. And that's kind of the sense of the story is it's a test. So the aliens actually test out the humans, and they've been coming down, doing their thing, little sightings here and there, but then it won't give too much away, but they go to Europa, which is a moon around Jupiter, I believe, and they literally sketch in a swastika on the moon, and then they start flying towards Earth. And I'm leaving some stuff out of there, and it's like, okay, how are the humans going to react? Because, all of a sudden aliens are attacking from a moon that had a swastika on it. And we did invoke the attack. And I won't go too much into detail on the book, but yeah, it was all a test. And it's like, are they willing to be peaceful? Are they going to come straight at us? What are they going to do? So, that's some way to look at it as well as, aliens may not open themselves up because, again, all of our media goes up into the sky and out into the universe. They've probably seen all our alien movies, and even the nice ones, E.T., there's always some kind of government people that want to take them down and study them and all that. So
Back in me.
Harvest their DNA.
Yeah, just all kinds of crazy stuff. Or, it's an all-out battle for the world. So, it's like, well, I mean, it's real. You look at it in real life, it's like, hey, you guys want to fly over to Africa and just walk around for a little while out in the jungle or in the desert? Would you guys walk around with me? Just the three of us?
No.
Why not?
Constructors, Python.
Why not? But yeah, there's places that we won't go because it's just like, well, we've seen what happens there. Well, they've probably seen, what we think aliens are. And they're like, oh, we got to slowly integrate or figure out how we're going to come up to these people. Because right now they're ready to shoot at anything that moves that's not human. So
yeah, so essentially Travis Walton thinks that or said that aliens are basically just like surveilling us. Is that kind of, we're not supposed to know they're there, and they're just
they're not doing a real
tabs
good
on
job
us?
of it then, if they're trying to be secretive about it, because there's been so many sightings and they keep taking people. So I mean, if they're trying to be secret, I don't know how secret they're really good. They're not real good at being stealthy.
Well, again, it's, if this is happening, are they slowly just kind of, you know, again, you don't just want to show up and land in the middle of
It's a
the
gradual.
White House lawn and be like, what's up, people? You know, no,
Right.
everyone's dead. So, you know, it's like you got to slowly make people believe a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And especially in today's times with all these new UFO or what are they called now? UAPs?
UAPs,
maybe.
unidentified aerial
Phenomenon.
phenomenon. Yeah.
Do.
Phenomenon.
Very good. But yeah, that maybe what they're doing is just slowly trying to get more people to believe. But with everything going on right now, it's weird because the government actually came out and said, hey, this is not one of our ships. And as far as we know, this is not a ship from Earth. They admitted to that. Why aren't we talking about this more?
Yeah.
You know, everyone is to the point where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, could be an alien. All right, whatever. You know, hey, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Weird. You know, it's like, so I think we're to a point now where they could probably land because we're so desensitized by everything that maybe it's time for them to come down and be like, okay, we are here. Chill out. We're going to kind of let you know we're here. We're not here to hurt anybody. We'll come back maybe, you know, a little bit every once in a while, give you some new stuff, upgrade things. Oh, by the way, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, because that's stupid. You know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if I'm up in the air on whether or not like aliens exist and in UFOs. I've seen some of the footage, and yeah, I mean, there's some weird stuff. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't. I'm not saying that it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. It's kind of like the way I feel about Bigfoot. I hope it exists, but I'm not really sure. So like aliens
looking in the wrong places. They need to go out by Vegas
because they live under.
Not look for a
donuts.
Sasquatch. You look for a sand squatch.
They hang out underneath the Dunkin' Donuts, right? So
No, they love Dunkin' Donuts. They hang out
Dunkin'
under
Donuts.
the casinos because they like the sounds of the slot machines. And they use Dunkin' Donuts, the glaze off the Dunkin' Donuts to wax their ships.
Yeah. This is from a whole different podcast that we've listened to about that stuff. But
there's people out there who believe that.
Yes. So with the aliens, though, I know a lot of people do believe in that. And I'm not going to say that Travis Walton is lying, you know, about his story. He believes it. He's had the same story for over 40 years now.
50.
I don't want to. I'm getting close to. Yeah, it's only a few years before I was born, so I don't want to say that word yet.
Yeah,
that's what
I was
saying.
a few
About
years
40
before
years.
you're born.
So, but he's kept that same story. So I don't want to say that he's lying about it. So maybe, as Doug said, we are kind of getting to that point where, you know, the government has admitted that it's opened up files on it, that it's tracking this stuff. So maybe there is something to it. You know, and we are getting closer and closer to that day where we won't be so terrified if they do show up. Somebody needs to make a movie about a really, really super cool, friendly alien that comes down and just hangs out and is like the best thing ever. And that would turn like everybody's minds. Better than E.T. Because people still didn't know what to do with E.T. Like, no, this got to be like the super coolest alien in history shows up. And
what makes this story interesting?
I don't know what he would have to do, but
see, that's the thing is when it comes to stories, it's hard to tell a story about a good alien that
like Superman,
everyone,
I guess, was a good alien.
But they're, you know, you had the bad guys.
And he also looked human.
Lex Luthor and what's that?
And he looked human. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you tell those kinds of stories because, you know, as you mentioned, you know, and the first one to walk off gets shot, you know, that's where a lot of people think so. Mm-hmm. So if that's going to pull people into the movies, then, you know, that's the way they're going to tell the story, you know. Yeah. Rocky wouldn't have been good if he just walked in there and two-punched Apollo Creed and the movie was over. It was like, oh, well, that wasn't worth it. You know, it needs the struggle. So, you know, again, I'm hijacking this, by the way, so sorry, but bringing it back to the movie, I would like to see the movie done in the way he explains it, but at the same point, I understand why they did what they did, because you could still tell the story about what happened after he was abducted. That was all creepy because nobody had a clue what was going on, and then bring him back and then tell the truth and everything. But yeah, I would like to see that done well. I think there's a story you can do that, because there is that struggle with the people who were left behind, the friends who drove away after he was hit, his wife who doesn't believe or doesn't know whether he's telling the truth or not, the family, is he dead, is he alive? So there's a good story there. But yeah, to come out and say, start of the movie, here's a good alien, what's it going to do? It's possible. It's very possible. And Paul, maybe, with the guys from Shaun of the Dead, that he was kind of but again, he was being chased down by. So yeah, see, government always wants to kill the aliens, so it's the government's fault.
Well, I kind of wonder if this film took it a little too far with the based on a true story thing, because what they presented was not really that close to the Walton experience. Like, it's loosely based on it, but if you're going to say something's based on a true story, I expect it to be more, closer to the actual story. And this one just kind of, they really turned it into a horror film when it was more of a, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a drama, the real story. And I like what we got for a movie. It was enjoyable. It was well done. But yeah, I just have some questions about some of the based on a true story things that we've seen recently, when there's like a significant change to the story to the point where it doesn't really reflect what actually happened anymore.
I think they should change when it says based on a true story. And I know you're going to have some changes. They have to take some licensing to make it more intriguing. But if they're going to change that much, if the director and the producer sit down and go, yes, we want to do this movie, however, the true part of it is boring, we need to change it, then you can't say this is based on a true story, because you've completely changed everything that he just said. Like everything. Now, if you want to say at the beginning, inspired by true events, I think that's a little different than based. I think based means I'm doing this on their story.
Yes.
I think saying inspired means I like that story. I was inspired to create a movie about it, but I'm taking my own licensing on this. I think there needs to be a difference between that. This is more inspired by true events.
Yeah, because Star Wars could be based on a true story,
Yeah, and then I changed
the rebels were the Americans or the people who were getting away from the Brits, and then they had the Revolutionary War or
the Emperor's King
Indoor
George
War. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, based on a true story. Right. So yeah, I like that. All right, everyone, right now, write your senators or whoever you need to, and let's make this law. Based, I mean, that's what they're there for, right? I don't know.
I don't know
based
what they're
on.
Yeah, this is America's most important problem right now.
It should be. But pass it around. Start saying, you know what? If it says based on a true story, then it's it's almost exactly how it is.
It needs to be like 90% accurate.
Yeah, this movie was inspired by true events.
This movie was like 60% accurate. 50.
Right. So it's not inspired by, you can't do that. And again, I know that they usually always change it. And I'm one of those guys that anytime I see a movie that says based on a true story and I watch it, the very first thing I do is I go home and I look up the true story.
Same
and
here.
I compare. I have to know what was accurate, what wasn't accurate.
Because people start spreading false information if you don't.
Exactly.
That happens.
There were people who thought that on Titanic, that Jack and Rose were real people. I remember
that movie never said based on a true story.
Well, because You're right.
It was.
I mean, it really was.
Actually, it was
So they
inspired
were like,
by true events.
oh,
And
there were cameras on the Titanic. They filmed this
Yeah.
whole thing.
They
Right.
thought that Jack and Rose were real people who died on the well, that Jack, died, and Rose. It's like, no, those aren't real people. Now there were some real people on that ship, but Jack and Rose were.
I thought
were
all the
not.
people on the ship were real.
Well,
Robots.
I mean,
Bad joke. Bad joke.
they
Keep
were.
going.
No, there was a couple, like a couple accurate
Oh,
characters
the
who were
unsinkable
actual.
Holly Brown.
Yeah. But like, oh, Jack and Rose, they weren't real, right? Like that was what made me so mad about Titanic, watching it, because like I said, knowing I always look things up. Well, a lot of these historical ones, I kind of sometimes I know in advance because I love history and I read about it. So when I see movies that I kind of already know and I watch them doing things out of order or it doesn't make sense, it irritates me to no end. Like, it's just my thing. Like, that's not even right.
Yeah, what drove me crazy about that was Titanic was a pretty big movie. And
Yeah, it was huge.
They had
Yeah.
some pretty good advertisements coming up and everything, or they did a lot of marketing. And multiple times before it came out, James Cameron and the other actors all said, well, it's based, on the Titanic. We made up this story about these two people who fall in love inside an event that really happened. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I knew 2 months before the movie came out that it was, a fake story inside a real event.
It just happens to take place on the Titanic is what it is. Right. But a lot of people didn't get that memo.
I guess not.
One of the most interesting parts from this movie that was true, though, was these guys did actually pass multiple lie detector tests. So that has always perplexed me. Like, if they were lying, because they had some motive to try to get out of this government contract, right? Because they were behind on this government logging contract, and they were to the point where they couldn't catch up. And if they couldn't catch up, they weren't going to get paid. So they were going to keep working and maybe even lose money on this job. So they got to find a way out of it.
Yeah, if
So
they didn't have it done by a certain date, they could get fined. They would lose the contract. So yeah.
They had Mike and Travis had a falling out. Mike said he wouldn't have anything to do with the story anymore. I think he may have even said it was false, and then he took that back. There's some weird stuff going on there, but then they passed that lie detector test. So what is going on there? I mean, can you train yourself to pass those?
I don't know if they could have those.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and no offense against anyone. I don't want this to come out bad, but first off, we're in the 1970s. So it's not like you can just pull up, how do you beat a lie detector test? You probably can't even go to the library. I mean, this is a small town. So, we all grew up in smaller towns. It wasn't like there were massive libraries. It's a small library. You can't go in there and hit the card catalog in 1976 and be like, how do you beat a lie detector test? Where's that card at? No.
If they knew somebody, though, if they knew one guy within government.
Okay.
Or
local police would not have administered the lie detector test. That would come from a higher up state official. Right? These guys are loggers. I don't think that they have high connections in government. A local police officer is not going to know how to even operate a lie detector test, let alone give one. Like, you get trained to give one. Like, not any police officer can just sit down and hand it out. You have to be a detective. You are trained on how to read it. So I can't see how these guys would know somebody who could teach them all how to pass a lie detector test without fail. And yes, people say, like, you can train yourself to do it. You have to keep your breathing steady and you have to do this. And I guess if, like, you tell yourself something over and over and over and over again, you can believe it, right? But I don't see how these guys could have passed the lie detector multiple times. I know one was inconclusive, but still.
They gaslit themselves
The first thing that comes up when I Google is, according to liedetectortest.uk, it's almost impossible to beat a polygraph test if it's conducted by a professional examiner who is unbiased. However, some say it's not difficult to beat the lie detector test. Here are some reasons why, blah, blah, blah. But they're saying it's nearly impossible to beat it. So I'm guessing that's something you've got to work on for years, and
Yeah.
spies do that. It's not like Ocean's 13 where you step on a tack when you answer the wrong question or whatever.
And I don't know how much time
yeah.
had passed before they took these lie detectors too, because weren't the guys given lie detectors before he returned? So that's
In the
only
movie they were.
Yeah, but I mean, still, he was only gone a couple of days. So you're trying to tell me in a couple of days they trained themselves to take a lie detector test?
Yeah, they probably would have had to plan it, in advance as soon as they knew they were behind. So yeah, the question is, did they have enough time to figure out how to do that? The only thing I can think of is if Travis faked his own abduction and didn't tell the other guys, but then he still has to pass it. So he goes up on a tree stump and jumps off and says that he got shot into the air by a UFO, and then he doesn't have to train the other guys to pass a lie detector test.
Okay, well let's debunk that one then.
Okay.
How was he faking getting struck by a beam of light thrown up in the air and dropped?
But that's only for the movie,
without them
right?
knowing it. No, he said that's what happened.
All the people saw this happen.
All the people in the truck saw him get hit with the light, lift up, and drop.
They all saw the ship. It wasn't just a light. They were explaining. They all said the same thing. The ship was metallic, round, blah blah blah. So Walters went out and got hit by a light. They all freaked out and drove away. When they came back, he was gone.
So tell me how a logger got a hold of industrial light and magic and said, "Come on out here and fake."
Yeah, Star Wars wasn't out yet.
That wasn't even around yet. They didn't even have that. They didn't have that kind of technology. I read somewhere where they thought they drove on this road and they had a spotlight up in a tower that they could, have somebody already there and flip the light on and it shines on him and it freaks everybody out. How are you getting this massive spotlight up into this tower? You'd have to have
a tower out to the middle of the
in the woods.
Is there an actual tower somewhere?
Yeah, there was a tower there, but that's not where they're saying they were at though. Someone else said well, maybe they went this way and they were actually over by the tower, but they're telling everybody they were this way because this is the road they would have taken. And they're like, no, this is where we were at. And I saw this video where Travis Walton was back in that location maybe 10 years ago. And all the trees in that area are burnt. And there's radiation. He said, this is where it happened. And there's radiation coming from the ground.
Huh.
So again,
I'm sure there's ways to debunk that too, but again, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm right there with you. I want to believe him.
Right.
I mean, truthfully, I would believe more in aliens. I believe aliens are more possible than ghosts, in my opinion. I know Drew's opposite of that, but now I've never seen either. I've never had anything weird happen to me, supernatural or science fictional. I guess it wouldn't be science fictional if they're real, but yeah, that just seems, I can see, stars, billions of stars out there, and each of those stars has 9 to 200 planets around it or something like that, whatever the case. Yeah, something could come from one of those. There's got to be something else out there. Right. But at the same point, I haven't seen it yet. So,
well, why does the UFO community reject Travis's story? Why don't they accept him then? I'm curious. Do you guys know?
No, that's an interesting question, because I know that they've tried to debunk his story too. I think what it is he was well known around town as being a UFO enthusiast. I guess he and his family loved the idea of UFOs. And then, of course, 2 weeks before his abduction, NBC aired that show with James Earl Jones about a couple that got abducted by aliens. And then, of course, 2 weeks later here, he's getting it. They look at the logging contract and how conveniently that was coming up at the same time. So I think that they're looking at him as, this is a way you're trying to exploit it. You're trying to make money off of this. This is stuff that maybe the UFO community looks at like, we take this seriously and we're really out there looking for answers. And you're doing this just to make money and get your name in the paper.
Because he did sell his story, right?
Immediately. And he got like money from the National Enquirer, which is, again, they were actually putting out. So, I mean, you can look at this and go either way with it,
Because no one believes the National Enquirer, right?
I don't think it was more like, I don't think it had a better reputation in the 70s than it does now. I mean, even when I was a kid in the 80s, I knew like that's a stupid newspaper. But
you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's probably why. I think they look at it as more of, you are trying to exploit this, make money off of it. You're not really a believer, while we're out here actually doing research and really trying to come up with answers.
Yeah.
But that's another way to look at it, is that James Earl Jones movie, which everyone's saying that that's where he got the idea from, came out 2 weeks before that happened. So a couple loggers who don't have a lot of money, who are struggling with money, how are they going to come up with this plan, purchase a spotlight, get power out to it, get it up on a tower that's not there, shine it down, and try to fake out 4 other guys with their ruse? And they did this all in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and have him disappear for 4 days.
And did the other guys make any money off of this? Because if they didn't, then they don't have motive necessarily.
I don't think so. I think he just sold his story.
Knowledge, yeah.
Huh.
So,
but again, I mean, why wouldn't he sell a story? I mean,
yeah,
I just got, beam blasted, and then I had to spend 4 days in a spaceship, and now everyone thinks I'm crazy. Well, yeah, I'll take a couple grand or however much they spend. I could use the money.
Yeah.
Buy a house somewhere else where nobody knows my name, and then I'll go start telling my story to other people.
Yeah.
It's like, well, all these, it's like getting on one of the guys from the 1980 USA hockey team that beat Russia, got the gold medal. It's like, oh, they're out there telling their story and making money. Well, it's a story people want to hear. So yeah, people should pay money for that. So I have no problem with him selling his story. It's what people want to hear. So yeah, do it.
Yeah.
I mean, people pay for stories every single day when they pay for their cable TV or go to a movie or anything like that. It's not much different. We're just paying money to people who already have money. In this case, we gave money to a broke guy. I like that better. So, sure.
Well, when we were researching for this movie, I did find that Harvard article that I'm going to post in the comments, and people can check it out. So this is a guy that actually did a research experiment on a bunch of people who claim to be abducted by UFOs. And this guy actually doesn't believe that the abductions happened, but he believes that the people believed they were abducted. So it's kind of interesting. And a lot of what we see in these movies is things people report when they've been abducted. I think one thing that we didn't see in the movie that 7 out of 10 people in that Harvard study said was that they had been part of alien breeding experiments, which was pretty scary. So that alone might make me hesitant to go looking for aliens or something.
Yeah.
But most of these people looked at it in like a positive light. I mean, it was scary, but the reason they did was because they felt special because they were chosen. I don't want to be chosen for that. Yeah, but
it was. I rated overall about an 8 out of 10 about being abduction. It was pretty cool, except for that breeding part of it. I'd do it again.
Yeah, you should really check that study out because it's quite fascinating.
takes me back to the SNL sketch with Ryan Gosling, where the three of them got abducted. Have you guys seen that?
I have not.
with Kate McKinnon.
Looked at, yeah, because it's so funny. Ryan Gosling can't stop laughing the entire time, and then everyone else starts laughing. It's kind of funny.
She was talking about.
You should watch it as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, it's Saturday Night Live, so it gets a little.
She was talking about getting probed.
Oh.
And that's where he was losing it. So.
Well, I have one last question for you guys about this film.
Right on.
What do you think the cultural aspect and like the impact of this film was on our culture? I mean, how did this film, with such an iconic abduction scene, how did it change the way society views aliens and alien abductions?
I don't know if it would have a lot back then, because again, in the early 90s, I mean that's just when the internet was just starting to pop on. There were like 12 websites, and so when people saw this movie, you had to go out and find people who were also interested in whether or not, if the three of us would have went and saw it when we were, let's say we're all the same age, we're 25 years old, we're going to go watch that movie in 1993. We'll probably come out of there and be like, oh, that was creepy. And let's talk about, well, do you believe in aliens? Well, no. And because even between 93 and now, which is 31 years, do you know how much information has come out about different people? You heard, well, in the 90s, people who got abducted by aliens were redneck crazy people. That's you see the people who, well, yeah, I got abducted by an alien, and they picked me up in my tractor and the truck, and my dog left me, and now I'm back. That's what you saw on TV in the 80s and the 90s when it came. And then, you'd get some serious professor up there like, well, you can see that he's in. It's like, well, there's another crackpot. And, that's the way it was back then. But once the internet came out, and then it's like, oh, hey, look at this. You started seeing a little bit more here and there. And it's like, oh, look at this shot I got. And then as cameras got better, it's like, oh, the camera's not sitting there and everything like it does back in the 80s and 90s. Now we got the digital stuff, and you're picking up things a little bit easier. So back then, it probably, got some discussion. It might have inspired a few people to look more into it, but I don't think it was as impactful as a movie like that today would be, especially if it were as good as that was in a time where there wasn't a lot of alien abduction movies.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even think of that many alien abduction movies off the top of my head right now. So
I'd say X-Files was probably more responsible for popularizing it.
yeah,
But I think
absolutely.
I read that the X-Files director had seen this and was very impressed with the abduction scene.
Well,
so that had to have a connection
Yeah.
in terms of inspiration.
yeah, he was definitely the X-Files creator, Chris Carter, and the executive producer was Frank Spotnitz. They were big fans of this movie, and they were really impressed by Patrick's performance in this film. That's why he got casted in the 8th season.
Yeah, I saw that.
But so, at the time, the critics, from what I'm reading, like Roger Ebert said that the scenes inside the craft were really good. It was convincing. It didn't feel like I was looking at a set. It looked like I was actually seeing something alien. And a lot of people, when they get to that scene, are super impressed by it. The rest of the movie, I don't think they were as impressed. But I kind of agree with Doug. When this movie kind of flew under the radar in 93 when it came out. And I think if it were released today with that realism, I think it would have a bigger impact. Back then, I think people looked at it as a science fiction film. And, it didn't have the impact that like Signs had.
Yeah.
Like when Signs came out, everybody saw Signs. Everybody thought Signs was creepy and all that. But I don't remember a lot of people talking about this movie, which is a shame because it does such a great job of portraying. I guess you can say it's portraying what an alien abduction would actually be like. So I kind of wish they would remake. If I had any, I'm not a big fan of remakes, but I wish they would redo this one.
You know, I was thinking as I watched that abduction scene, I thought this would not be the same if they tried to do the aliens all CGI. Like the way they did it makes it more frightening than it would if they did it today and tried to use all CGI. Like I'm thinking of that alien scene at the end of Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, and that's what I'm imagining would happen here.
That alien looked about the
Please,
same
no.
too, if I remember
They
right.
should just
Little bit,
remake
but
this movie and then
Oh,
keep
one
the old abduction scene in here.
I would. I know that there is talks about redoing it, and I don't know if they're going to go more on Travis Walton's true story or if they're going to add something.
When he was on Joe Rogan, that's what he was saying. Is they're trying to get somebody to buy it, and they want the movie to be made more accurately.
I'm up for that, and I mean, still, even if it's not him getting experimented on, I'm sure that it's still going to be. Still got to be terrifying waking up and being on an alien ship with these guys dragging you around or putting you here and you not knowing what's going on. And I would love to see that. I would love to see what, his side of the story. But yeah, it's just a shame that this movie didn't get the praise I think that it deserves.
Roger Ebert in his comments about this film, I remember he said that he'd never seen something like that on film before. So that abduction scene was like a new moment in cinema, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
And again, it's sad that it's not more popular because, like you said, it was done really well. Again, watching it today, I wasn't as creeped out as I probably could have been when I was younger. And like I said, I don't remember when I was younger, but the practical effects, I still think they can hold up if they can do them well.
Yeah. And DB, like I said, DB Sweeney's acting in that whole scene was just outstanding.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he carried that scene in his reactions and the screaming and the terrifying. I mean, that's probably what made it the most terrifying was seeing how terrified he was.
Yeah.
And putting yourself in that position, Ugh.
And he's a heck of a skater.
Yeah. He played baseball. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was like a figure skater in the Olympics one year.
That's when he was named Doug Dorsey.
He was going to play hockey.
Yeah, another movie.
The Cutting Edge.
Okay.
He was Joe Jackson in 8 Men Out.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Which was filmed right here.
He's been around.
Well, guys, I guess that's it for this episode. We are live streaming in 2 weeks from today on Monday, the 24th. We're going to be covering Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So if you watched that movie, hop on Monday, 2 weeks from today at 8:30 Central and talk about it with us. Post your comments and your questions on YouTube and we'll talk about them.
Yeah, you should definitely watch it because it's important. It means something.
Easter eggs.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. See you guys soon.
Good night, guys.
Night.